This boy claimed to be Steve Jobs in a past life, and it's one of the most chilling reincarnation cases in history. The air in Cupertino on an unseasonably warm October afternoon in 2028 hummed with the familiar Silicon Valley symphony of innovation and ambition. 10-year-old Ethan Chen lived in a sleek, minimalist smart home nestled among meticulously manicured lawns, a testament to his parents' success in the tech industry. His mother, Dr. Evelyn Chen, a brilliant AI ethicist, and his father, Dr. Marcus Chen, a renowned quantum computing physicist, both worked at the cutting edge, their lives a blur of algorithms, conferences, and venture capital pitches. Ethan's world was one of augmented reality games, drone racing in the backyard, and coding camps, a typical bright and slightly introverted child of the digital age. The scent of artisanal coffee from the kitchen mingled with the faint metallic tang of new electronics, a constant backdrop to their otherwise serene existence. Outside, the relentless whir of self-driving cars navigating the suburban grid was a lullaby. Ethan, a slim boy with an unruly mop of dark hair and intensely curious brown eyes, was usually found hunched over a tablet, designing intricate virtual worlds or debugging his latest robotics project. He possessed a sharp wit and an unusual knack for problem-solving that often surprised his parents, who attributed it to their genetic predispositions and the stimulating environment they provided. His room, a haven of order amidst a whirlwind of schematics and circuit boards, often felt more like a miniature lab than a child's bedroom. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, subtle, disquieting ripples had begun to surface in Ethan's behavior over the past year, almost imperceptibly at first. He would occasionally stare off into the middle distance, a look of profound, almost ancient contemplation on his young face, as if processing data far beyond his years. He'd sometimes dismiss new gadgets, even the ones his father brought home from the lab, with a dismissive wave and a muttered, "It's just not elegant enough." His critiques of interface design were eerily precise, sometimes offering solutions that stumped even his mother, whose professional life revolved around user experience. The first truly chilling incident occurred on a rainy Tuesday evening. The family was gathered around the holographic projection in their living room, watching a documentary about the history of personal computing. Images of bulky mainframes and early, clunky desktops flickered through the air. When a black and white photograph of a young Steve Jobs, intense and focused, flashed on screen, Ethan, who had been quietly assembling a complex Lego Technic model, suddenly froze. His small hands, usually so deft, became still. He looked up, his eyes wide, and pointed a trembling finger at the image. "He built that. That's my company," he whispered, his voice oddly hoarse, a strange blend of recognition and proprietary pride. Evelyn and Marcus exchanged amused glances. "Yes, honey, that's Steve Jobs. He co-founded Apple," Evelyn explained gently, assuming Ethan was just excited by the historical figure. Ethan, however, didn't return to his Lego. He remained fixated on the screen, a flicker of something unreadable, almost mournful in his gaze. "They never understood the vision," he murmured, barely audible, then added with a sigh that seemed far too heavy for a 10-year-old, "The pixel density was always the challenge." Evelyn and Marcus chalked it up to an overactive imagination, a child absorbing historical facts and weaving them into his playtime. But the oddities escalated. Ethan began to show an uncanny interest in Apple's early history, devouring biographies and documentaries with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He would correct technical inaccuracies in articles with an almost pedagogical certainty, citing obscure facts about circuit board designs and operating system development that no child his age, even a prodigy, should know. One evening, Marcus was struggling with a complex problem involving an ancient Macintosh SE30 he'd acquired for a retro computing project. He was muttering about a logic board fault. Ethan, walking past, glanced at the disassembled machine. "It's the capacitor. The tantalum ones always went first. You need to replace C7, he stated casually, without breaking stride. Marcus, surprised, checked the schematics. Ethan was precisely correct. A chill went down Marcus's spine, but he dismissed it as coincidence, Perhaps Ethan had overheard him discussing it previously. The true revelation arrived with the stark clarity of an unexpected system crash. It was during a family vacation to San Francisco, a trip meant to be a relaxing break from their demanding schedules. They were visiting the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. Ethan, usually so reserved in public, walked through the exhibits with an almost proprietary air. He paused at a display featuring an original Apple I circuit board encased in glass. His small face pressed against the barrier. His eyes traced the intricate pathways. "This was my baby," he said, not to his parents, but to the board itself, his voice laced with an undeniable, profound melancholy. Evelyn knelt beside him, her heart thumping. "What did you say, Ethan?" she asked, her voice hushed. Ethan turned to her, his eyes unblinking, filled with an inexplicable grief. "They changed the fonts. I told Wozniak, no serif fonts, not for the original interface. It was about simplicity, elegance." He spoke with such conviction, such an intimate understanding of the design philosophy, that Evelyn felt a cold dread begin to coil in her stomach. That night, back in their hotel room overlooking the bay, the Golden Gate Bridge a sparkling necklace of lights in the distance, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, his small hands clasped. He looked at his parents, his gaze unnervingly direct. "I'm not Ethan, not really. I was Steve Jobs," he stated, his voice calm, resolute, utterly devoid of childish embellishment. Evelyn gasped. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a nervous tremor starting in his fingers. "Honey, that's a wonderful imagination," Evelyn began, trying to keep her voice light, but Ethan shook his head. "No, it's not imagination. I remember. I remember the garage, the smell of solder, the late nights. I remember the fear of failure, the thrill of creation. I remember being kicked out. I remember next. I remember the pancreatic cancer." His voice cracked on the last words, a genuine sorrow emanating from him. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea. He couldn't possibly know about the cancer. They had never discussed it in front of him. Marcus, ever the scientist, tried to rationalize. "Ethan, how do you know about that?" Ethan shrugged, a very adult gesture. "It's just there, like a faded memory, but real. I can see the lines of code in my head. I can hear the arguments, the brainstorming sessions. I know how to make the next big thing, but they're not listening." Over the next few weeks, Ethan provided an avalanche of impossible knowledge. He accurately described the interior layout of the original Apple garage, including a distinctive oil stain near the workbench and the specific brand of tools they used. He recalled conversations verbatim, even minor squabbles with Wozniak over technical specifications, details that were not publicly documented. He critiqued the design flaws of early Apple products with an expert's eye, pointing out specific component choices and manufacturing decisions that led to later issues. During a visit to a local computer museum, he walked straight to a glass case holding an original Apple II, pointed to a specific chip, and declared, "That's a B-grade chip. We ran out of A-grade during that batch. It caused minor overheating, but we shipped it anyway." The deadlines were insane. The museum curator, a grizzled historian of computing, was dumbfounded. Such information was highly specialized, rarely discussed even in academic circles, and certainly not available in any children's books or documentaries. The Chens, a scientific family, initially sought psychological help, fearing a dissociative disorder or an elaborate delusion. But every therapist, after extensive sessions, concluded Ethan was of sound mind, remarkably intelligent, and genuinely believed what he was saying. There were no signs of fabricated memories. His recollections were too precise, too emotionally resonant. The media, catching wind of the whispers from the Silicon Valley grapevine, descended like a flock of hungry birds. Overnight, the Chen family became a global phenomenon. Television crews camped outside their house. Tech journalists, historians, and even a few skeptical physicists arrived, eager to debunk the sensational claims. Dr. Aris Thorne, a renowned historian of technology and author of several definitive biographies on Steve Jobs, was among the most prominent investigators. He arrived with a team of researchers, their faces a mixture of professional skepticism and thinly veiled curiosity. Thorne devised a series of rigorous, controlled tests. He showed Ethan obscure photographs of Apple's early days, asking him to identify people, objects, and locations. Ethan passed with flying colors, often adding anecdotes about the people in the photos that were later corroborated by obscure archival documents or interviews with elderly former Apple employees. He identified a specific, almost invisible scratch on Jobs' original desk in a black and white photo, a detail only visible in high-resolution, professional-grade prints, explaining it was from a misplaced screwdriver during an all-night coding session. If this shocks you so far, subscribe and tell us in the comments what you think about reincarnation. The climax arrived during a live television special, broadcast globally from a meticulously recreated replica of Steve Jobs' childhood garage, a set built for an upcoming biopic. Dr. Thorne, standing before Ethan, his expression a mask of scientific impartiality, held up an image of a handwritten note. It was a cryptic drawing, mostly lines and circles, found among Jobs' personal effects, its purpose never fully understood. "Ethan," Thorne began, "can you tell us what this means?" The entire world held its breath. Ethan looked at the drawing, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Ah, the early cube concept," he said almost fondly. Before even the Macintosh, I was toying with an idea for a simple, elegant personal computer that would be a perfect cube. It was meant to be revolutionary in its form factor, easy to manufacture, modular. This," he pointed to a specific circle on the drawing, "is the internal optical drive mechanism, designed to be almost entirely silent. We abandoned it because the manufacturing costs were too high for the technology available at the time, and the cooling proved to be a nightmare for such a compact design. But the idea persisted in a different form years later." He then meticulously sketched, on a whiteboard, a three-dimensional rendering of the cube as he envisioned it, complete with internal component placement, explaining the unique cooling system he had imagined, a system that predated modern vapor chambers by decades. Dr. Thorne, his jaw slack, could only nod slowly. The sketch was revolutionary, a design far ahead of its time, a concept that had never been documented or discussed publicly in such detail. Later, under even more controlled circumstances, a historical architect involved in the garage replica project posed a challenge. "There's a persistent rumor," he said, "that Steve Jobs once hid something within the walls of the original garage. A time capsule, perhaps, or a memento from his early days, but we've never found any evidence." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Not in the walls," he corrected, his voice a whisper. "Under the loose floorboard, near the workbench where Wozniak always sat, there's a small wooden box. Inside, a schematic for an early, never-released Apple game, Breakout 2.0, as I called it, and a lock of my hair. I wanted to see if anyone would ever find it." The architect, consulting historical documents, confirmed a faint irregularity in the floorboards near the workbench of the original garage, dismissed as structural settling. A team was dispatched to the actual historic site. Days later, news broke around the world. A small, intricately carved wooden box had indeed been found exactly where Ethan had indicated. Inside, a faded, hand-drawn schematic for Breakout 2.0 and a small, brittle lock of hair, later confirmed by DNA analysis to be from the late Steve Jobs. The revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific, religious, and historical communities. The DNA confirmation was irrefutable. Skeptics scrambled for explanations, but none could account for the impossible confluence of Ethan's knowledge, emotional resonance, and now physical proof. Scientists grappled with the implications for consciousness and the nature of identity beyond death. Theologians debated whether this was a miracle, a divine sign, or a challenge to their established doctrines. Historians were forced to re-evaluate entire narratives, adding Ethan's testimonies as crucial, previously unknown chapters in the annals of tech history. Ethan, the boy who was once Steve Jobs, continued to live in Cupertino, albeit under intense scrutiny. He still loved coding, but now his projects took on a different tenor. He designed new interfaces with a minimalist elegance, focusing on intuitive user experience and seamless integration, echoing the philosophies of his past life. He spoke often of the next great leap, of merging human intuition with artificial intelligence in ways that would revolutionize interaction. His parents, now devout believers, struggled to reconcile the scientific principles that defined their lives with the profound, inexplicable reality of their son. They watched him, a 10-year-old boy with the memories of a titan, knowing that the world would never quite be the same. The question lingered, a persistent echo in the halls of science and faith. What happens to a soul, a consciousness, after death? And if it returns, what does it mean for us all? What do you think? Could this child truly be the reincarnation of Steve Jobs? Comment below and subscribe for more chilling cases.